Hello and welcome to another video. My name's Deb and this is Debsbeeing, and today we're making reusable grocery bags. I've been wanting to make reusable grocery bags for a while to pair with my reusable produce bags, and I was inspired to do this for my next video because I was shopping with my boyfriend and we were buying groceries and we didn't have my reusable bag with us. And he casually mentioned that pretty soon plastic bags are going to be illegal. And this is a very good thing. And it's best to be prepared for these things before they come into fruition. So I made a reusable grocery bag for him because I already have one. And I decided to do this whole project by hand because I've been recently watching YouTube videos by Bernadette, and she sews everything by hand, and she does like historical clothing and historical stitches, and she did this video, 3 historic stitches. I'll link it below so that you can see in greater detail the stitches that I am doing, and watching her sew made me really want to sew by hand and practice my hand sewing. I am not as good as her at hand sewing, but it was a very fun project to do by hand and I really enjoyed myself. Okay, so this is the bag. It comes with a little pouch like 3 usable produce bags do. I made my pouch a little bit too small, so I recommend making it about 1 inch bigger than I did. This is the bag. I finished the top with bias binding, and all the other edges are finished with something called felling. So let's get right to the tutorial. Using a light cotton fabric I got from the thrift store, I folded it in half lengthwise and then again widthwise. For the body of the bag, I measured 9 inches in from the fold and 21 inches up from the edge. For the handles, I measured 7 inches down and 1 inch in from the lines I previously marked, and curved it into a J shape. On the folded side, I measured 7 inches in and 9 inches down. I made a curve here as well. Then I cut this out, and I had my bag shape, approximately 18 by 21 inches. For the pouch that will hold it, I folded my fabric in half once lengthwise. I measured 5 inches in from the edge and 5 inches down from the fold. I cut this out. I opened up my strip of fabric and measured 4 inches up from the edge. This leaves me with 1 rectangle 5 by 6 inches and 1 5 by 4 inches. I rolled and pinned 1 5-inch edge on each small rectangle, as well as pinning the top of the handles together. I really wanted to hand sew this project because I've been watching Bernadette on YouTube, as I said previously, and she hand stitches near everything. I will link her channel below, as well as her video that explains the stitches that I'm using in this video. As you have seen, I whip stitched these rolled hems down. Once that was done, I folded the top edge of the longer rectangle down so that the rectangles are now the same size. Do this with the rectangle good side up and place the smaller one on top good side down. Pin the side seams and mark a 1/2 inch seam allowance as a guide. Then I backstitched the side seams into place. Cut one layer of the seam allowance down to 1/8 of an inch and fold over the rest of the seam allowance twice to cover all the raw edges. Whip stitch into place. This is called felling a seam, and Bernadette Banner goes into more detail in her 3 historical stitches video. Repeat this process for the other side. Now for the bag proper. I backstitched the top of the handles together, and then I trimmed the seam allowance, rolled the edge, and whip stitched it down in a similar manner as before. This is a great way to finish raw edges because it is very strong. I marked a 1/2 inch seam allowance around the body of the bag. On the left side, I measured and marked 4 inches down from the handle opening and pinned the pouch into place. I used a running back stitch to sew the side seams as it is a bit faster and these aren't weight-bearing seams. When I trimmed the seam allowance, I accidentally cut through both layers at the bottom. I used this opportunity to give the bag a bit more shape, so I measured 2 inches in from the corner both ways and joined these markings with a diagonal line. Then I whip stitched the edge down as normal. I repeated this process on the other side, starting 2 inches up, about where I made my mistake on the other side. I also repeated the diagonal line on this corner. I cut off the bottom corners following the diagonal line. And then I finished whip stitching down the second side seam. After pinning the bottom edge, I backstitched across the marked seam allowance line. Since this seam bears a lot of weight, it is important that it is strong, hence the backstitch. I finished the seam using the same method of trimming the seam allowance and whip stitching it down. For the corners, I pulled open the seams and matched up the bottom and side seams. I pinned and backstitched this into place. To finish the seam, I used bias tape, as felling the seam would be too bulky. I used the straight stitch to secure the bias tape in place. To finish the handles and opening, I clipped bias tape around and secured it with a straight stitch. And I was finished. It works really well, though the pouch is a bit too small. how I made a reusable produce bag completely by hand. I thoroughly enjoyed making this project. It was very satisfying to hand stitch. There's something about hand stitching that really makes you feel closer to the project, but it also makes me feel like I'm from the past or something. It's very soothing doing hand stitches. And it also helps with my patience, because sometimes I get into these ruts where I'm like, oh, it needs to be done right away. I need to finish this as quickly as possible, so that I have instant craftification, as they say. But taking my time really helps me to appreciate how long things take and to be done well, and how important it is to take your time and do things right the first time. The fabric I used for this was a lightweight cotton, and then I got this bias binding at the thrift store. I don't know how much I used because some of it was already used and I didn't measure it beforehand. Well, that's all for now. Have a lovely week. Enjoy being part of making the world a greener place. Goodbye!